Hello everyone and welcome to today's episode of Lebanon First. Now before we get started with today's topic, I am going to spend the first minute or so of this podcast doing a quick recap for those who missed out on my podcast the previous week. For those who missed out on my podcast the previous week, the topic which I discussed was my future political ambition in Lebanese politics, and that would be my intention to run as president of Lebanon. Last week's podcast was merely an introductory podcast. So fast forwarding to the present, today's topic will be about why we need an alternative system to religious confessionalism. Before I move on with this podcast, I'm not entirely sure if all my viewers know what religious confessionalism is. Therefore, I am going to give a definition of the term. It is defined as the following. It is the distribution of political power accordingly to the different religious groups present in that respective country. To elaborate on this definition, I am going to give a quick summary of what happened in Lebanese history following World War I. So following World War I, Lebanon was free. The Lebanese people got a taste of independence from being under Ottoman rule for 400 years. But rather than becoming its own country, Lebanon switched hands from the Ottoman Empire, which had become an outdated empire by then, to the Imperial France. While Imperial France was in charge of Lebanon from the end of the First World War up until the 22nd of November 1943, which is Lebanon's Independence Day, by the way, France took the liberty of dictating to us how we should run our own country. Instead of being a guide, or a facilitator, if you will, on how to run our own country, as well as our own external and internal affairs, France decided to maintain a master-slave relationship with us, in that they formed a political system which was fully in their favor, and they forced it onto us. Imperial France, and all their quote-unquote wisdom, decided to give us a system of government known as religious confessionalism. I just defined that earlier. In Lebanon's case, religious confessionalism took place in the following manner. The president must always be a Maronite Christian. The Speaker of Parliament must always be a Shiite Muslim, and the Prime Minister of the country must always be a Sunni Muslim. France's quote-unquote logic behind this move was based on two factors. The first factor was numbers. So what do I mean when I say numbers? Well, in Lebanon's case, and in the country's last population census, which took place in 1932, and that is a freakishly long time, 1932. That's like almost 90 years ago now. Maronites were the largest group in the country, followed by the Sunni Muslims. And in third place, you got the Shiite Muslims, being the third largest group in the country. Based on these numbers, the Maronites were to receive the most important seat in Lebanon's future republic, as well as take most of the power in the government of Lebanon. However, there is something flawed with this strategy. With all due respect to all of Lebanon's religious sects, numbers do not have any value. Let me elaborate on this. What I am trying to say is the following. Even if a group of people are large in number, but they lack the skill set, the capabilities, and the potential, they cannot assume such heavy responsibilities. Now, that is not to say that the Maronite Christian sect lacks the skill set, capabilities, or potential to take charge of the office of the presidency. But the point I am trying to make here is giving a sect responsibility in government just because of its numerical size is absurd and irrational. For example, if all it took to have strength was to be large in size, to be a large group, a country like Syria, for example, wouldn't be under the control of a minority group as it is today. Like the Alawites in Syria are a minority group and the whole country is Sunni Muslim. So you guys can see where I'm going with this, where I'm going with my point. But Syria isn't the topic for today's discussion. I just thought I'd use Syria as a reference to elaborate on my point. Anyways, therefore, arguing that strength is a criteria for the prosperity of large groups is a risky assumption which could lead to both negative, short, and long-term implications. The people need to see proof of competence and responsibility before we let anyone from any sect near the presidency or any position of government for that matter. The other motive behind France's move was based on historical factors. So from the 1500s and onwards, and that was the same time period in which we became part of the Ottoman Empire, the 1500s, the Maronite Christians of what was Mount Lebanon at the time were very powerful nobles who were in charge of most of Mount Lebanon's affairs and were also rich textile merchants due to Lebanon's booming textile industry at the time. So before I move on with this podcast, just to elaborate on something really quickly, Lebanon at the time was just known as Mount Lebanon. So when someone talked about Lebanon 500, 400, 300 years ago, whatever, that was Lebanon, Mount Lebanon. The north and south Lebanon, the north I believe was part of Syria, the state of Syria, the vilayet. My Turkish isn't that good. The vilayet of Syria, and then you had Palestine at the time. The south of Lebanon was part of Palestine. So Mount Lebanon was Lebanon at the time. Anyways, let's not get sidetracked here. So in a nutshell, the Maronite Christians were more or less in charge of Lebanon, or I should say Mount Lebanon's affairs during the 1500s. Their influence and vast wealth survived well into the 20th century. Based on these historical factors, France decided to give most of the power in Lebanon's political system to the Maronite Christians. So this would make sense really, in Lebanon, anywhere else in the Middle East, anywhere else in the world. The wealthy guys, the guys with most of the influence, they grab everyone else by the balls. That would make sense. But there is a counter argument for this. You see, in politics, when someone is put in power, they usually grasp onto power, and they grasp onto it very tightly. They hold on to power for dear life. They show no sign of letting go anytime soon, and many people become drunk with power in that they disregard all laws and all rules. Unfortunately, this is what happened in Lebanon. The Maronite sect became so obsessed with being in charge and being the favorite in the eyes of France and other foreign powers that demands for political reforms, notably those in the 1970s from the Lebanese left, in which the opposition demanded one of the two. Either the sectarian system of rule in Lebanon be abolished, we get rid of it, give it the boot, or that a fairer ratio of Muslim to Christian seats in government be established. Both of these demands fell on deaf ears, which is understandable, because as I mentioned previously, this is how power is. Maronites, because of France's decision, enjoyed numerous privileges from 1943 until the 15-year civil war, which started in 1975. And these privileges are part of what caused the civil war. Maronites got most of the privileges. They had most of the power. All the other sects in the country, the Druze sect, the Shiite Muslims, the Sunni Muslims, Greek Orthodox, and other minority sects in the country, they just became disenchanted and envious of the privileges which the Maronite sect got. The remaining religious groups in the country were under the impression that they were second-class citizens in their own country. They felt that they weren't treated fairly. However, I don't want to talk about the Civil War today. It is a different topic for another time. So we are going to talk about religious confessionalism, which is today's topic. So going back to today's topic, I have the following questions to ask. Why? Why does it have to be like this? Why do we insist on committing national suicide and deliberately engaging in this dirty game of divide and conquer set up by France? Why can't we just have a government which doesn't bore us to death with religion and why religion is an important part of Lebanon's political system and all that crap? Why can't we have a government which does its job and actually helps the people rather than squabble like an old married couple over who has the better religion and leave us to rot in the process? I'm going to give the answers to all of the above questions. First off, I really don't care if the president is a Maronite Christian, a Shiite Muslim, a Sunni Muslim, a member of the Druze sect, a Buddhist, or a Hindu. Heck, the president could be a worshipper of a flying spaghetti monster for all I care. I don't care. This isn't about the presidency though. This has nothing to do with the presidency. Because all positions in government are restricted to different sects in the country. This is about Lebanon's political system as a whole. Putting people in certain positions of power because they're entitled to them because of their religion, their religious sect or whatever, that's just going to create more problems. It's not going to make people happy. It's not going to make people's lives easier. It's not going to fix things in the country. It will just create more and more and more problems. We need people with brains who are in charge of the country. We need people with a nationalistic outlook in charge of the country. We need people who don't give two shits if their pockets feel like the Sahara Desert and are in government not for the money and the fame, but for the common good of Lebanon and Lebanon's territorial integrity as well as its sovereignty. We need people in charge of the country who do not put our livelihoods and well-being at risk over their own external agendas. And now, ladies and gentlemen, my favorite part of the podcast. The weekly roast of Lebanon's political elite. As always, guys, me and everyone else is sick and tired of your shit. We are sick and tired of you guys distracting us with religion and pointless issues pertaining to religion while you guys live like God emperors and endlessly embezzle the money which we work hard for. We want a change and we want one now. You and the outdated system of religious confessionalism is no longer received with a warm welcome by Lebanese society and the Lebanese people. While you guys bicker about religion as you're wearing your fancy suits, you are leaving us to die and rot by the tens, if not hundreds of thousands, due to the pollution caused by garbage and other factors, courtesy of your incompetence and your negligence, of course. You are leaving us to rot and die because of an inefficient healthcare system. And you are putting the youth of the country in a position of resorting to crime because you don't give a fuck if our hundreds of thousands of youth have a source of income or not. Eventually, death reaches us all. That is the inevitable reality of life. It reaches us all, death, sooner or later and one way or another. And when you depart from this world, you will know the true meaning of what it means to be punished and suffer eternally for your sins towards the people who you quote unquote claim to care for, as well as for your sins towards the country. Thank you to all my viewers. God bless you all. Stay safe and never stop fighting the tyranny. Like always, guys, don't forget to hit me up with that subscribe and the notification bell so that you are constantly up to date with Lebanese politics. And I wish you guys all a nice day, and I will see you all next Wednesday.